This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Chapter 36, Tale of Two Stories, Part 2. Where do old stories go to die? As we are nearing the end of these stories about stories, it's a fair question. Do stories die? Do they end? Can they end? Or are they like energy, only and always changing form? Sure, our stories will go on through the stories of others we have touched. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about stories as we carry them. Can we leave them, or lose them, or let them drive off into the sunset without us? This is more important than you might think, because unhealthy stories that linger can and often do become multiplying, malignant destroyer agents. And that can be happening in the background of our psyche without us ever consciously knowing. Some believe our stories go on life after life. We've talked about this. Even with all I've told you so far, I'm still not sure that's how it works. In fact, I'm more and more convinced that, given that time is not real in any fundamental way, the idea of past lives falls apart pretty quickly. As a frame, it may be useful to capture story patterns. As a reality, do we really want to be that linear? Yet it does seem that we are each born with a psychology unique to us, no matter our biology or sociology, and a series of personal themes to work with. Where might they otherwise come from? Could we then at least imagine, maybe entertain, the idea that stories have multiple lives? That they go on as we do? Evolve as we do? We as carriers of stories, as the vehicle, not the owner. Could our stories be living us instead of the other way around? In this, could our stories be alive in some way? If so, what part of a story is alive? How does it breathe? How is it passed on? When it comes to relationships, simply put, your story plus mine together, what constitutes our story beginning, middle, and end? If alive in some way, can there ever be a completion between us? Is our dance a dance of eternity, always changing partners, with at least a little evolution each iteration, we hope? As a writer of fiction, I know that all stories must end, and thank God for that. You do get tired of writing even the best of them. But where in time do we make the call? Rarely at someone's last breath. At the funeral? After a year of grieving? When the last one who remembers is still standing? As a novelist, I have had to make the decision of where a story will end many times. As a human being, I can only throw up my hands and say, I have no idea. What I do know, what I have found in myself and the many others I have worked with, is that we don't like our stories to end. We want to tell them again and again, even the bad ones, sometimes especially the bad ones. Our grips are tight. Yet in this, as in everything, consciousness can emerge. We can choose to see our story-ending fears for whatever they are disguised as: loneliness, the unknown, the bad that can and does happen, death even. Like everything, once conscious, we can deal with it. I've spent a good deal of my life considering endings, as by now you know. I've been force-fed grief. My streets were once paved with anger because of it, but today, I have an uncommon equanimity about what ends. Even the big ending, the personal, unavoidable, ever-hovering D-Day for myself and others. Death, I see you. I know you. Here we are, old friend. You have prepared me well. Enter the labyrinth. I, and who knows which I, could only watch as the formidable one packed the house, drove me down the long driveway that had so recently been mine, got me through security at the airport, and shoved my suitcase into my garage apartment before I collapsed in grief. Then I, again whoever I was still I at this point, watched the formidable one collapse alongside me, take one last breath, and slip away. However I was going to get on, it wasn't going to be by way of her. Not this time. This was about surrendering everything. That much I knew that I knew. But how? And what was left to let go of? Everything was already gone. Whatever drive was left within me got me out of bed each morning, nudged me to go to the salad shop once a day, and got me to make a few phone calls to seek whatever help I could find. I met the therapist I've already spoken of, the one who said most aspirants on the journey to full consciousness don't make it. Something I didn't tell you. I immediately replied to her, I will. I will make it. There was not a hint of bravado or passion, not ego. It was a knowing. I was in this to the end. I came here to be in this to the end. Some part of me understood the journey I was on. Some part understood that, however difficult, it was right and true. It was the part of me that arrived upon my awakening. Those second set of eyes, now far more active. We might call that part wisdom or even love, but to be as close as possible to the experience, let's call that part awareness. There was a sense that this part of me had been on this same journey before, maybe in some far-off place or in another life. Maybe I'd gotten this far the last time and was picking up where I left off. Or maybe I was already further than I'd ever gotten before. Maybe I'd arrived here 1,000 times and would again. This exact spot? No way to know. I only knew this was familiar. Awareness, and let's call her a her, understood that my life was and always had been an inner journey. Nothing external mattered. It was about the way I saw the world and not the world itself. The world was a result, an after effect. She saw this clearly, and always had. This patch of loss, heavy as it was just another push in her direction. Another initiation. All the not knowing that I would have to endure would be the hardest part for me, she understood. It was a point of suffering that all alchemists, all mystics, all awakeners must eventually face. But I in particular would have a rough time with it. I had a self that had become so accustomed to knowing what shouldn't be able to be known. I took pride in it. That pride was clearly unwarranted now. Awareness said, I didn't have lion because I was lion. I didn't have love because I was love. I didn't have guides because my guides were and had always been within me. The only way forward was to point my gaze inward. Internalize, then metabolize. Rinse and repeat. Own everything. Everything. Angels were not out there, not in a stadium behind Billy Graham. Awareness insisted they had appeared to my eyes, but so far as I knew, no one else had seen them that night. Awareness said that was a clue. My alien stories were not out there, but in here. Isn't anything that is not within the ordinary reality experience alien to us? And could that foreignness not also be coming from some unknown aspect within? The parts of us, real and true, that live outside of our expectations of what a normal human is supposed to be and have and do. What would we call them if not alien? If we are made of soul and stardust, spirit and earth, would there not be some part of each of us having a non-earthly experience? In this, I understood why the dream teachers had stopped visiting. In fact, awareness suggested I might have been teaching myself all along. Now I no longer needed my education to appear from outside of me, or even from in the sleep state. That made sense, but it was a grief all its own. Another loss, another solitary confinement without visitation. From then on, I knew there would be no greetings from disembodied voices, no brilliant white lights in showers. We were in new territory. Barren, unknown, unfathomable. It's what all the mystics have seen, awareness reminded me. Don't sweet-talk me, I barked. I could handle anything but more false promises from the spiritual path. Hadn't I had enough of those? Awareness told me I did not have to work out my life on my own, but that most of the time I would not be able to see the organizing principle that was doing that work. Awareness didn't ask me to trust. That was not a useful concept at this stage. We agreed. In my drowning, I would think I was seeing lifeboats coming, figments of a life that could emerge for me, only to find they had holes in them. I stopped trying to get in them, and eventually stopped seeing them. This, awareness assured me, was progress. Nothing that is not real can survive, I told myself. Nothing is real, awareness corrected. She was honest, at least. Again and again, I was returned to my inner self, and the question of self, the illusion of self, and the non-self being the I that I also was. When I complained it was too much, awareness said, "No, you are well equipped for this. This is what your life has been pointing to all along." I knew she was right. Still, who can blame me for trying to wheedle my way out? Awareness didn't judge. Awareness had compassion. Like a strong, silent, and kindly old woman, awareness walked me through the barren, broken-hearted journey of soul death. She promised no revival, no next level, no final, penultimate pinnacle where I could at last lift my fist in victory. There was no prize, just the walking. Some days, most days, awareness was all I had, my only clue to go on. Awareness assured me that there was no way out of my often acute pain. No use in pushing, no trying to go faster, no early death for all that was in the process of dying. Any attempt to interfere, to help my smaller self, would be like opening the cocoon of a butterfly too soon, while still in its own chaotic goo, before it had the wings to fly. "So, there will be a butterfly then?" I asked, wanting promises. Awareness said it was best not to hope for anything in specific. Awareness said that the world begins and ends within, and so to be isolated to face the within directly was a gift. That an early dying was a field of potential. A gift no one wants, I said. Awareness could only agree. Awareness insisted she was to be my only guide, my only way through. Yet I was not to cling to her either. No clinging of any kind. Occasionally I thought, maybe awareness is not a true voice. Maybe I'm losing it like Salome. Awareness said it was wise to entertain all possibilities. Thanks a lot. Awareness understood the fullness of light that had no particulars, no attributes, no distinctions. She said she would hold all distinctions for me for as long as I needed her to, until I was ready to fully embody the all of everything. If you can make sense of that, you're further along than I was when she said it. Even if the all of everything only happens at the moment of Robin's death, it would be worth it, wouldn't it? Awareness asked. I did not answer, but I knew it would. I also knew it was inevitable. I'd seen the end game of the universe. I wasn't worried about that. Awareness was the one who insisted I was honest when sharing how bad off I was, I as Robin, especially with those close to me, and now all of you, however it chopped off my egoic head. There could be no bravado, no pretending, no pushing a single thing under the rug. That would abort the mission. Misery was an expected part of it, awareness assured me, not a failure, an honest response. Everyone went through it. Everyone who went all the way on the way. She insisted there could be no addictions to escape into, nothing excessive. I argued sarcastically, except solitude itself, we have an excess of that. She didn't seem to mind my pissy postulations. Just be with it all, she advised oh so zen, even as the chaos oozed out of me morning after morning, like pus from a bad case of leprosy. Awareness had been through this before, I thought. Of course she had. She's not my awareness. She's awareness itself. I could not find a community to join, nor did I care to create one, probably because I was in a community of selves within. All parts on board, as Salome would have said, had she been talking to me. On board for what? On board for what? Becoming rarefied, awareness answered one day. In other words, alchemical distillation. Well, I knew where to learn more about that. I read everything I could find, but, as awareness already knew, it did nothing to hurry the journey along. The journey is the journey. Reading about it is reading about it. I noticed that in time, I was no longer aiming at or gunning for anything in particular. But along the way, I was becoming an expert on my own body, brain, and my individual connection to the greater mind. I had all the time in the world to see how Robin worked, in minute detail. Sometimes, like a reprieve for good behavior, I'd get a spontaneous peek at the true nature of all things. I'd swoon at the curve of a piece of wood on a doorway or the shine from a desktop made from glass. Sometimes I'd fall vertigo-like into the complex living patterns of a plant leaf. Those moments affirmed the journey, kept me going. I had always understood the self dies on the awakening journey, but I had no idea, none, it could go this far, that the journey would be so hard. One day, in a medicine journey, I asked if my soul was actually dying. It's already dead, I was told, by whom I don't remember. I went inward to check. Yes, that was true. I was soulless. This I cannot explain except to say it was the vanishing of vanishings, the emptiness of empty. No one believed me when I said my soul died. No one wanted to. It's not in the spiritual psyche these days. The soul, so they say, is the one thing that continues. No one wants to imagine we might lose even the last little bit of us that is ours. I didn't have to imagine it. I was living it. Later, I would discover a book that clearly articulated the process of alchemical soul death. So I wasn't off the mark. I was spot on it. After a few attempts at explaining that my soul death, and not my ending with Scotty, was my primary dilemma, I stopped talking about it. What was the point? No one got it, because no one had been through it. I imagine it sounded like a fancy story to cover my egoic tracks. But I couldn't explain further, because I myself didn't understand. In solitude, I grieved my own being, my Robin, my self-soul nature. Robin, as I had known her, was gone. Gone, even as she held on, like dead fingers gripped to a coffin lid, as it is lowered into the ground. It was useless, I did understand. Still, the self-soul dies hard. I asked awareness, would some greater I, perhaps an I that I did not know yet, or some kind of I without an I, would that be taking over, filling this void? No answer. When will this be over? I asked again and again. No answer. So I made up stories. Soon, next March, this April, by September. I pushed, asking awareness if Robin would ever be alive again, maybe better, maybe as the phoenix rising. Robin will be usable, awareness answered. Whatever that means, I complained. It means just that, usable. It's like extracting the Mercedes or Ford out of a particular motor vehicle. The vehicle is still usable in the way it always was, but it would carry no unique attributes, no essence of style or meaning, surely confer no status. Side note, the day after this metaphor arrived, I found a dirty hubcap with the Ford logo on the sidewalk outside my house. I appreciated the punctuation mark. Anyway, extraction sounded right. It was an ugly and painful process, even without fighting it. It made me look weak, ridiculous, and a fraud to my earlier life. This is your way, awareness assured me. It doesn't matter how it looks to you or anyone else. You can only go your way. For a time, I became completely disinterested in ordinary people. Muggles, I called them, to quote Harry Potter. I tolerated them and they me. Increasingly, they looked to me like the characters in the Wookiee bar from the movie Star Wars, strange to the point of comedy. In fact, everything began to look like a movie in front of my eyes. I told some of my friends this, but again, it was not in their experience, so I stopped sharing. I pretended a lot. As I would learn, many awake folks pretend they are not awake when around others. How else are we going to get along in a world such as ours? Only with my good friends and my children did Robin genuinely appear, though not how I would have liked. I wanted her to shine, to be strong, to be moving forward. But that wasn't true. Wasn't honest. I tried to explain and failed every time. Then I retreated again to my solitude, where the Robin that anyone knew disappeared, more and more. I looked at what was left of my life, taking a regular inventory. I saw only patterns. Countless at first, but fewer and fewer over time. I discovered things I did not want to see. For example, my deeply transactional nature, the core of my most ugly personal agendas. I understood that we are all transactional, up there on the surface. I wasn't finding anything in myself that was not in us all. Still, it killed another set of illusions. Robin as loving, kind, special, chosen, important. Those stories all fell apart. Though I felt terribly sad and steeped in grief, I did not feel depressed. I had known chemical depression early in my life, been thrown down by that terrible gravity for years upon years. Remember that part of the story? Doesn't it seem like a forever ago? Whatever this was, it wasn't depression. There was no staying in bed under the covers for days on end. No self-destruction. The self was dying of its own accord, no need to compound that misery. I was hopeless, true, but not as a fluctuating mood. It was a state of being, a fact. Hopeless. Something about knowing the difference between that and the classic depression helped, I thought. Awareness agreed. At the same time, whenever necessary, there was a huge reservoir of power within me. Real, usable strength, physical and emotional. I assumed it was all the stored-up energy I didn't use in my daily life. It was available to me on tap, and at a split second's notice. I showed it to a few people, the physical aspect, like a powder keg, like a car going from 0 to 60 in a split second. It always created a kind of energetic ripple, a physical sensation in the one I was revealing it to. One time, in a strange encounter with a man I did not know, we somehow got into a battle of playful wits, and I was invited to show this strength again. I asked, did he really want to see it? He did. I threw a ball of energy at him so powerful, it completely knocked him back. I laughed and left him to unstun himself. That power was a signal that not all was lost, only waiting. Again and again, I woke to wish this part of the journey would just fucking end. That time would have her way with me and be done with it. Awareness indicated that, in the wishing, I was pedaling backward. Awareness also reminded me that time was irrelevant, even if persistent. Awareness made it clear that if I pretended, even for a moment, that all this wasn't happening, if I allowed myself any kind of break from the story that was unfolding, that it all would only return for me to face in a future attempt. And who knows when this great opportunity will come again, Awareness added, and what might need to happen for that to be the case, she pressed. That scared the living shit out of me. Oh, and the Robin that seemed more fearless than most others earlier in my life? Yeah, she was gone. I was petrified of what was happening. When I remembered the dream of the Indian man locking me in that barren, 3-bedroom, ranch-style house, I took a shamanic journey back to check in. On the floor, I saw myself, now emaciated, near skeletal, thin-skinned, and curled into a fetal position. I insisted the native man return to check on her, and he did. I was demanding, protective of the me on the floor. He gave me a sharp look, then went to her, knelt down, and asked her gently, "Can you take a little more?" I was astonished to witness her nod and say, "Yes, I think so, a little." He looked back at me, the one journeying as if to say, "She's fine." But clearly she isn't fine, look at her. He ignored me and left, locking the door behind him again. It would be many years before I could finally blow a hole out of the side of that house, no key required, motherfucker, and watch her transfigured self walk out. Whomever this native man was, and I knew he was also from within me, God motherfucking damn it, he wasn't going to get the last say. Awareness ignored my antics. "Walk with me," she would say. She spoke to me through knowing. There was no gut feeling, no inner niggling. Either I knew or I didn't. She told me that I wasn't crazy and never had been. I was an explorer of the greater depths where few would go or ever want to go. I was there because I wanted to be there. Greater I argued. Of course, she agreed. Awareness said that both she and the cost of this journey had been with me all of Robin's life. Hadn't I seen life so clearly even as a child? Hadn't I seen death and the other world so young? So where I am now, this has always been planned, I asked, already knowing the answer. Why didn't you reveal yourself at the time, I asked. No such thing as time, Awareness replied. Goddamn circles, that's what I was running in. Awareness wanted to point out that Even from an early age, I had never sold myself out. Not to my father, my mother, not to my social circles, not to anyone. I had maintained my center throughout my life. Wasn't that awareness showing herself even then? Awareness told me that to love truly, one had to know times without love. So I was right on track, I snarked. Awareness said that my continued sense of humor was a good sign. Snarky is allowed, she offered. All feelings are allowed. I was glad for any good sign. Awareness taught me that love and grief were twins, and that the price of life and love in this realm only, was the illusion of loss. If nothing was real, nothing could be lost, she reminded me. She admitted this was a particularly difficult aspect of my transfiguration. Transfiguration, her words, which came out of the blue one day. I would be embarrassed to use that word then, and even today. Way to go, self-aggrandizement. But what else could this be? Awareness told me that my greater family members, far more beings than I had known in this life, were there in the unseen worlds, and that I could connect to them any time I wished. I found that hard to believe until I had a potent medicine journey where I woke to find myself in a hospital bed, somewhere outside of time and space. I was connected to a huge array of medical devices through needles and tubes. A male nurse, only partly human, spoke firmly, "Don't get up. You're not okay." Of course, I started to get up and was again reprimanded. "Don't get up. You'll be okay, but you're not now." I asked if there had been an accident. No. Then what happened? We cut every human cord you have. Every human connection is gone, and you are left with open wounds. I felt them all over my body, sticky, gaping. I began to panic, but then to my right, I saw my father, mother, and Ricky, just as I had on my old front porch, the day they all looked at me with such pity. Now I knew what that was about. They must have known this was coming. Maybe everyone on the other side did. Ricky drew close, took my hand and said, "Robin, I beg you, beg you, beg you. Do not think I am a dream or an illusion. I am right here holding your hand right now." In that moment, I felt him. I swear on my life, I felt the full of him. Ricky, his scent, his mannerisms, his very being was there, next to my body on that bed. He was real, still with me. It was as profound an experience and as great a comfort as I can possibly tell you. One day, awareness explained, finally, that Lion had laid down only because it was time, and it was Lion's way not to talk about it, that I should not take it personally. I knew that story was just another story, but it helped. Awareness told me that to love someone who wanted to leave our journey together required letting them go. I said I already knew that. Awareness said she knew that I knew, but that Scotty was the toughest letting go. This was precisely because it wasn't Robin's choice and she was not ready. But awareness nudged gently. Robin might never have been. True. Awareness told me I would be able to love another partner again, but that in the end I might not wish to. I bristled at that. Why would I not wish to love someone for the rest of my human life? That's who Robin is, I argued. It's what she does, how she moves through the world. No answer. Or maybe no answer was the answer. Awareness suggested that if I wished to love someone, yet had no one to love, I could instead be love. I could love without an object. Nothing was stopping me. Awareness told me she would always love and honor Robin for the sacrifice of self she was making. And for as long as I had a Robin, which would be a necessary thing to have as a participant in this great illusion called life, at least so long as I had a body, Robin would be able to feel this inner love. The Ouroboros that could eat her own tail could also love her own heart, Anytime I wanted to feel love, I could simply step into it, become it. Awareness suggested I stay in appreciation of all the things that were not problematic in my life. I was healthy after all. I had a beautiful home, lovely nature to explore, fresh fruit and flowers from the farmer's market. I could work and write and contemplate the wonders around me. Also, despite it all, I could still give. I was not bitter, not shut down. My urge towards generosity and kindness had not died. But what about war, poverty, climate change, I argued, thinking I should be doing more for a suffering world. Only when they come directly to your door, awareness said. You've worked with those stories many times before. Hasn't everyone in life? And are they solved? Besides, you are working on them now, even if you don't understand exactly how. I probed that one and understood. AI would have the potential to solve so many of these issues. That's why I went to Silicon Valley, where I had found the leaders I now work with. We may find something good for our evolution, however afraid people are of it now. How will I know what is on my door if there's no me? I asked. Each individual, and you are still that, must feel what is theirs and what is not, never looking too far off nor too long into the future. To take on more than what you know to be your portion of suffering is to interfere with the intercourse of all things. Is there a specific higher aim for my life in particular? I probed. You are here to explore and expand the growing opportunity of consciousness within the current limits of the human brain. Oh, is that all? And I am to report on this, my task, through writing, yes? Awareness made it clear. That is your creative choice. Nothing is required. Creative choice. Now, there's a can of worms. Awareness didn't have to warn me not to have casual sex, that those free-flying days of my earlier years were far behind me. That would create a mutual damage, and my path was well beyond that. How different that was from the last time I'd been single. Progress? Maybe. Self-preservation? For sure. Awareness reminded me love is a beautiful part of the journey, but not the whole journey, not for you. For you, consciousness is the star of the show. Seems obvious in retrospect. Anytime I complained about how this long journey was becoming too long, awareness answered with ideas like, the more you know, the more you don't know. In other words, with a cliché. I had to admit, though, that's exactly what it felt like. That the more you know, the more you really, really don't know. Knowledge is expansive, not limiting. I got to the point I was becoming afraid to know more for all the ever-widening circles of not knowing that any new knowing created. That, and the more I knew about the esoteric, the less other people could relate to me. In my learning, I was separating myself further and further from the common experience of life as it was lived by humanity at large. That felt dangerous. When I felt I was going too far, I'd head out to the Wookiee bar just to pull me back. When, I asked so many times, would I feel alive again? All is now, awareness answered. Only your stories are distancing you from that. Shit. Yeah, right. Why do you prune the yellow leaves of your plants? Awareness asked one day out of the blue. To not see death, she replied to her own question. She was like that. You never knew when she was going to pipe up. Side note, this chapter is getting long, I know. I tried to make it shorter, but awareness wanted it this way. Maybe you can feel her with us now? Anyway, it's her chapter, so diving back in. Astonishingly, awareness always showed up for my clients and the others I was called to help, just as Lion once had. No shamanic journey required. Awareness was so much larger and more powerful than Lion. And so my magic, not that it was mine in the first place, when focused outward, was clearer and stronger than it had ever been. As my clientele grew in their capacity for reach, so my reputation grew among those shaping our world. Word got around. On my worst of days, I was grateful for all the years I had trained myself to enter another's world, then flip the switch of my own life off, so as not to have a single thought about myself. I had grown that capacity to last a few hours at a stretch, as that was how long a shamanic session would usually take. And so when entering my client's world, my own world went dark. It was like existing in beautiful, numbing, icy blue water, sitting perfectly still under a wide open sky. No fog, no distraction, no pain. It was a beautiful reprieve from my own journey, which made me want to work all the more. There were times when my lack of personal agency was made to feel worse when compared to the magic I could offer others. Where's my Robin Rice, I would ask. But most of the time, I was grateful. Not only did I have high-impact work with lovely souls, I got to spend time in the vicinity of magic, which meant it still lived somewhere. Whenever I was truly unsure of what awareness was pointing me toward, I put pen to paper with no idea in mind. Countless writings over the years, like this one, emerged from the void. You wonder, whatever happened to so-and-so? That's how it is when you awaken. Whatever happened to that girl you were? The planner, the worrier of plans, the one afraid to step beyond a known door, riddled with insecurities. Whatever happened to her? Oh, she became an old lady nobody sees. Not the hungry, shoeless sort, though. She jokes with the gods, cackling at the goddess ways around a fire no one sees. She makes love to the moon, liberated from all constraints of form with no procreation in mind. She holds the candle when the new souls arrive and washes the fears of those exiting, touching their feet to help them go. Whatever happened to, what was her name? Even she doesn't remember. Between these writings and the signposts of alchemy, I kept at the journey, until finally, one ordinary day, the path of Dzogchen arrived to greet me. I felt an immediate memory arise, a recognition and a relief. Dzogchen explained everything, without explaining anything. Exactly. Dzogchen doesn't ask you to believe in anything, only to inquire within to learn what is true. No teacher required, nothing to accept or reject. Just instructions to return to the essence of what you have always been. Transmitted through the culture of Tibet, more recognition, yet largely unknown even there. The Dzogchen teachings were both accepted by the Dalai Lama as the highest path possible, but also set aside as a path that is only realistic for those who are already enlightened. Perhaps he meant only those of us who had experienced awakening, as I did, because I didn't find it far-fetched at all. I found it perfectly true. As I read the few books I could find, I realized I'd been saying many of the same things when I was teaching. I found it delightful that the teachings are said to be found in 13 solar systems other than our own, outside of our time and space. No, we are not alone in the universe, it says without fanfare. Also, since it's a tradition of direct transmission, my heart warmed to learn that there is something like a dozen transmissions from one being to another before it got to a human being on planet Earth. Aliens. It felt like validation. If I was crazy, I was in good company. It was helpful to know that at the end of the human life journey, the Dzogchen master, who might be your neighbor, how would you know, as this is an entirely internal journey, will seal themselves up for 7 days with instructions not to be disturbed. Those who know the tradition wait with great anticipation when someone does this, for if all goes well, only the hair and fingernails are left at the end of the 7 days. The master's body has become a body of light. So, Jesus wasn't the only one. Fascinating. I discovered Dzogchen during COVID, a time when travel to a human teacher was impossible, and so in meditation one day, I asked for a direct transmission across the ethers. It seemed totally doable, given all those generations of beings who held this tradition long before it came to us humans. Surely my ability to journey to other worlds could come in handy. A long-past master appeared and said I didn't need the transmission, but since I had asked, I could expect it in 3 nights' time. I expected a dream, but the minute my head hit the pillow that 3rd night, still wide awake, a vision began. All the bells and whistles of the initiation were brought into the space, along with several masters as witnesses and guides. It was a spectacular movie happening across the back of my eyelids. Last year, I attended a gathering of the disciples of one of the living Tibetan teachers and had a profound experience of being unable to move for almost an hour. I did not find the community to be a draw, though. There was only one man, a leader in the community, that I felt a strange connection to. Over several unspoken encounters, we finally literally bumped into each other, spilling my tea. We never properly met, though the energy was palpable. I swear, I know my people when I meet them. I knew I didn't need the community, however valuable it was to others. I had what I needed in the path. I trusted myself to make my own way with it, however much that might be frowned upon by organized communities. In Dzogchen, even Dzogchen must be forgotten. I left the people and the books and kept the way. While this way was having its way with me, it wasn't all bad. Blessed be the day I met a man in my own driveway who had spent his career researching, of all things, enlightenment experiences, both ancient and contemporary. We became friends, but once again his community did not speak to me. Even so, he introduced me to a man who had introduced me to something beyond spectacular. Enter the queen of all medicines, Bufo, a dirty yellow substance secreted from the glands of a particular toad found only in the Sonora Desert. 5-MeO-DMT. My holy heavens! I could write an entire book about my toad journeys. Never ever had I found a medicine that so completely mimicked my spontaneous awakening on November 15, 1997. In finding this medicine, I finally had a clue as to what happened that day and where, through my brain, and then beyond it, to my mind. The medicine opened a door that is tightly shut in our normal human experience. What glorious realities, what stunning insights, what impossible possibilities. If you have traveled the Bufo Road, you know exactly what I mean. If you have not, there's no way to explain. The journeys not only returned me again and again to the stunning perfection I'd seen in my awakening, they showed me how to work with my brain in such a way as to be able to better understand my own mind, which was not mine at all, but the mind of us all. Consciousness, there you are. Of the few who dare to risk their current reality, and are privileged enough for the opportunity, most will only take the Bufo journey once. I took it 20 times. This was not greed, but built on the intention of going out into the universe and bringing more awareness back with me. I only stopped because during my 20th journey, I was instructed to stop poisoning myself. What was Bufo like? A friend described it as pulling up your car at a stoplight and having a pterodactyl get in the passenger seat. I'd say that's only the first 1% of what it's like. You can't imagine all that is out there. The imagination does not begin to stretch far enough. In this exploration, I understood that our brains are capable of 10 million times more than what we know and experience in ordinary daily life. Yet our brain is, interestingly enough, the very organ that currently limits our access to the greater mind. Consciousness is a capacity, one I was fortunate to awaken to early, but we are all capable once we break through the built-in limitations of our rational leanings. Bufo, and then later MDMA, helped me to rediscover that the axis mundi had an infinitely high high, and not only the low low that kept pulling me down like quicksand. In fact, I learned this was the great dilemma, the only true war. Our greater aspect pulls us up. Our humanity and extraordinary will to stay in this human form pulls us down. Both are incredibly powerful, and both are beautiful in their own way. It's a war of the highest order, in fact, where all external wars stem from, and it's going on inside each of us right now. Deal with that war, my friend, and you've got real spiritual game. I have such gratitude for the universe providing these medicines as I walked through my own journey of soul death. I was never too far from a reminder of how things could be, hopefully would be, once this stage of the journey was over. But even over was an idea I had to rid myself of. That and the idea of other as well. My path was solo for a reason. From a human perspective, that was hell. From a greater perspective, it was a door. I recall a piece of writing talking about that door coming from awareness, cryptic but full of essence. Like hope, like fire, open, willing, what wishes to be born. Hold nothing as nothing, a remarkable feat. There is another door waiting, another reality existing. Do not think that you know. Whispers grow louder, still faint, yet enough to hear. Dragons guard the gates. They know your name. Have been waiting for their master's return. They will let you in. Just arrive. Bliss is not what you think, and all thinking is fear. Rid yourself of every no. Enter the primordial state. This kind of writing was confirmed as the right way for me to go, just a year into the journey. It was Christmas Day in Palm Springs, and the kids had come to visit. Together we left the swim weather to trolley up the mountain to a blizzard-like snow. We each took to our own path, and I sat under a tree with my journal, thinking a poem might come. Instead, only these words were written. Poet-writer, not writer-poet. I wasn't sure what that meant, but only a half an hour later, when perched high on the hillside, a Japanese man with a camera from far below yelled to ask if he could take a picture of me. I gave him a thumbs up. After, he yelled up again, "Are you a poet?" I nearly fell from my mountainside. I wanted to find him later, but he was gone. Maybe he was never there. Maybe he was only inside my experience, like everything else. So all of this, was that other side of the coin, the other half of my journey of deconstruction, the truth of how things were and how they went. If you think it took a long time to listen to this chapter, just imagine how long it felt to live. Thankfully, all things change. After 4 years surveying the wreckage that was my external personal life as Robin, I knew that all that was left was to finish writing and telling my own story, the one you have been hearing here. In doing so, I saw a few possibilities. First, to return again to being Robin, such as she is, taking on another season of life, maybe love and partnership form, a life with grandchildren, another piece of service, and all that ordinary life entails. Second option, I could finally fully eat my own tail, and the experience of Robin would become something else. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.